yes, you're on camera, you go.
Okay, so when we have somebody, I'll start from the beginning. When we have somebody coming into town from out of town, they don't know this place at all, or they've only lived in Garner my whole life, because people are like that. They only basically go from their work or from their school to their house and just maybe know a couple streets. They didn't even go 3 more streets down into their neighborhood to know what it turned into. Like, people are always surprised sometimes when I show them a neighborhood, even next door to where they currently live. They didn't know those kind of houses were in there, right? Because you don't weave all around like that or get on Google Earth, I guess, and look around. So we want them to understand what makes the area tick, what people do, and when they come in to kind of find out what their life is, what their kids do, what they do, what activities, whether it's recreational activities, whether they have to be somewhere every weekend, whether they go 3 nights a week to their church, whatever it is that they think they're going to bond and tether to because they know what their lifestyle is, pull some of those things out as you're getting to know them. Their forward things like their family, their occupation, recreational desires. You know, that's that forward stuff you've always heard about. You guys heard that forward principle. You always want to be thinking about those things when you talk to them to get to know them, what plays them on their life and how this house is going to be a cornerstone of how they blend into the rest of their life. So I always go over the map, and the map kind of starts with me as I'm going to go a little smaller this time, so I've got room for other things. But I'm going to start with 440. It's not perfect circle, but it's there. And we'll have our little inside the belt line area. And that there's a spoke that comes off this way, not so perfectly a straight line, but it'll be US 1 and capitals.
So,
all right, then we go off this corner, we'll go US 70 to Glenwood. And then there's a little area in the middle here, that'll be the airport. And it'll be Homestead Park, right? And then you start getting this quadrant, which is Cary, Morrisville, and Apex. And now things are really blossoming and moving. And this is US 1 and 64. And 64 keeps on going. And US 1 goes down here. And then you start hitting Holly Springs. So for a long time, this is North Raleigh as a whole. And now we got 540 coming all around to Holly Springs. And it's going all around over here. And you got Nightdale. And you've got Wake Forest. And you got 401 splitting off, doing Rollsville. And then if you start going out this way, we'll have Garner. And there's 50 and highways down here that start getting you to Clayton, which is out of county. It's still a very growing area for our area. There's some streets that go across here that are kind of what I consider southern area, area 9. When you start learning the areas, if we ever need to learn them anymore, it'll be Penny and 1010. And there's 98, of course, up there, and then Strickland will go across. So it's always good to know Lynn Road, you know, kind of get people acclimated too, that if they're going to start getting an area, like there's these main thoroughfares, like Lynn Road, Millbrook Road, Strickland, and then there's a north and south that goes 6 Forks that connects 540 to 440 and all those things that kind of keep the area ticking. RTP in Durham, kind of off these ways. So most people will come to the area and start looking for, say, a bread and butter home of 250 to 350 or 300 to 400. Most of the time, a lot of them start gravitating toward the ideas of, you know, where are people who've got a kid or two like me and what's good, and I've done some research and I've looked at good schools and I've looked at this and I've looked at that. But we're trying to explain to them too, the reason it kind of lays out this way is a lot of people start populating in these areas, and a lot of people start populating in these areas is because they're all commuting, and commutes are very important. as a whole, probably about 80% to our major economic hub where people come in and out for their jobs to RTP. So again, even if you don't work in RTP, you work somewhere else, you still want to be cognizant that people moving in the area, out of the area a lot, when you need to sell your home, probably will be tethered towards something toward RTP. Because what's RTP? RTP is mostly tech, pharma. So I also explained to people, our economic hubs of our industries here for jobs are pretty safe bets. Most people need tech and most people need pharma. And then we've got a pretty good sprinkling of hospitals and medical facilities. So we get a lot of the retirees who come here to be either kids and grandkids. Because we are a land of suburbia with a lot of kids and grandkids. And then we've got a lot of young professionals moving in for these tech jobs, you know, because we've got the Red Hats and the Lenovo's and the Biogen IDEX and all those like fabulous companies have headquarters here. So if you run into people who are relocating, just keep in mind too, they are going to keep in mind, or you may need to lead and remind them to keep in mind, they probably are going to sell again in 3 to 5 years. Cyclically, maybe move out of the area for the next job because that's corporate America that they're a part of. And they want to be in a place that they can pull the ripcord when the days for their promotion comes up and reload, taps their shoulder and says, we want to send you over to Phoenix. So you got to keep these things in mind that they want to be within about usually a 30-minute bubble of drive time. And tier 1 will be North Raleigh, this midtown up to 540 and 98. And we are bordered on the very, very tip top by Falls Lake. Right? Almost all of Wake County is bordered and geographically topped off by Falls Lake. Right? And down here, we are bordered by Jordan Lake. So when people say, I want lake property, I'm like, great, we've got 2 huge lakes around here. You can go at a boat ramp, you could rent a campsite, you can go roast marshmallows, some of them have a little beach area, you can go swim. But it's all owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, so you're not just going to go have this resort neighborhood sitting on a big lake. Here or there's small lakes and small ponds throughout neighborhoods that you might have a little bit of a canoe dock or something. But these are our major boating lakes, and you just got to get them familiar with that. If they're boaters, some people, they want their boat, they want to keep their boat at their house, they want to know how to, you know, navigate all these things. So anyway, that's kind of the way things are, is people are going to land a lot of times in Northwest Raleigh and North Raleigh, or they're going to land in Superior Morsel Apex, that's starting with 540 to Sprout Holly Springs, because the schools in general start being a little stronger on the stats that they all see nationally. I'm not saying anything that I'm making up for myself. Are usually stronger in these areas, and it keeps them going very quickly to work. And then when you look at the Durham side, a lot of people just go right inside the borders of Wake County from Durham County. Schools are driven by county, not cities around here. So that's another thing a relocator needs to understand. Wherever county you live in, no matter what the town name is where your schools are going to be assigned from that county. So they want to be in Wake County a lot of time because it's just statistically and score-wise, year after year after year after living here my whole life, those schools have not seemed to have ratings that people want to choose or would feel good about. So they consistently come to us and want to be in some of these others. Now, when you got a young professional or a young couple or someone who says, I'm never having children and say, our retirees, you will see, and it's very strategic, the developers put these Del Webb type communities when you get up toward Briar Creek, just over the line, right? Because they don't need the schools, but they need that location by the kids and grandkids. So it's a very strategic, smart thing to do. It keeps those land values and property values up for them, and they can buy it a little cheaper. So just know that if someone's kind of looking at that, you'll understand why that they're kind of bordering right inside, even paying as much as $50,000 to $75,000 more for houses just a couple miles away from each other, inside a line and outside a line. The same builder built in 1999, and it's the same floor plan. positions. They feel like I'll just pay less for my house, be closer, and then I'll do private schools. So these are combos I just hear people do quite often. And then the farther you get away, the less expensive in general real estate tends to get, because the commutes tend to get a little farther. And statistically, don't get me wrong, there's pockets here or there that compete well with the schools around here, or maybe even outperform some of the schools over here. But as a general holistic view, they're stronger, it tends to look like in these areas. That's where people are gravitating toward them. Inside the Beltline is gonna be super expensive, super old, because that used to be the only little central spoke where everybody could get anywhere quickly. It was considered the Disneyland of our area, according to McNamara. So you definitely just notice folks who are used to living more inside a city, or walkability, they say, to things, you know, they might want to get toward 5 Points or something, but that's the reality check is suburbia might give you a 3,000 square foot house built 10 years ago for your price point, where here you might get a 1,200 square foot house built 80 years ago. What do you prefer? You know, and they kind of get that sometimes 540 has opened the world up, that it doesn't have to be so hyper-focused right here. Something I showed Stephanie when we were talking about some people coming in from California yesterday too. Growth rings are interesting. It's kind of like a rock in a pond that they're in a hidden area, and then the rings will ring out. So things have kind of started here and then populated wherever, but things keep growing outward and growing outward. When North Raleigh, it grew outward centrally quite a bit, and then the last 20 years, 10 to 20 years, it's these pockets that have grown quite a bit. So when people used to come to me a few years ago and say, I'd like to buy a 3 to 350 house, and you know, this is kind of what I see myself living in, a neighborhood with a pool and a lot of other kids or whatever. They tell me these things they're looking for that just come around the corner. Ironically, when they drive around and see where those people are living, because they can see the swing sets out and the kids out on their bikes, they tend to be 1990s to 2000s built in this area, in these little areas. So when you think of these areas, I think of Leesville areas, because there's lots of little neighborhoods up and down here. And then in this little area, it's kind of the Falls River, kind of that whole Durant type area, Bedford. You just see a lot of suburbia housing, right? And a lot of this is just a lot of what I'd say 50s, 60s, 80s. Not a lot of 1994, 1992 and newer until you get to these pockets. And I just want you to know, like, that's visually just where a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, I picked these houses up online and it looked like it had what I was looking for. And then it's always like, okay, we'll go to this corner of Northwest Raleigh and we'll go to this corner of Northeast Raleigh, because that's just which spits out the chute more often. And then when people are open and say, okay, I've heard a lot about Cary. Well, once Cary got built out and it's gotten so expensive and it's got a little bit of age to it, well, then it sprouted out toward Morrisville. And now it's high demand and sprouted out heavy in Apex. And then it is hotly growing Holly Springs. So if someone says, hey, I feel better as them as a realtor for their resale, the closer they get to these little corners, the closer they get here, but I can't really find what they need. I can only find, say, a townhome, and they really need a home, then I might say, okay, well, can we go out this way a little bit more? Can we go out this way a little bit more? Before I just throw in the towel and go maybe a lot farther away, you know? So that's kind of focused on that area.
You want to now kind of pinpoint the major shopping areas so they can see how close, or I can.
Yeah, you got it.
Right, so the next questions I feel like I usually get is, oh, I want to be close to the grocery store and close to movies. So then I start to let them know that the way our city is built out, like every little area has its own major hub. So I tell them about Crabtree Mall here. All the way at 1 and 540, we've got Triangle Town Center. As they head out 40, out here, only about 7 minutes, you've got Streets of South Point. Down here off of 64, we've got Beaver Creek Commons. Where's Parkside Village? I think I got supposed to use Parkside right here. Parkside right here. Parkside up to 55, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be more and more.
55, yeah. We got Parkside here. And then right here in Cary, we've got Walnut Street, what's it called? Crossroads. We got the Crossroads. So they've got these major shopping venues, and these are all like 20 minutes away from each other. So you could literally live in any of this area and be 10 to 20 minutes away from 2 to 4 major shopping areas. So I think it's really important as you're driving them around, if you turn out the subdivision and go 5 minutes to the right, you're gonna hit and name some major anchors, Marshalls, TJ Maxx, Phelps, whatever major mall is there, and the movie theaters, because these are things out of Briar Creek.
Yeah.
Right? So and then because I used to send them home with a map as well, with all this written on it. It was very helpful for them, giving them these visuals. And I've shown some of you, but when I'm doing it by email, I send this by email with the homes, right? So I want them to know, hey, this home is close to this home is close to this, to give them that visual and kind of pull it full circle for them.
There's a Walmart in
But I try to get people to understand the area a little bit and how it ticks. So, like we have people in here yesterday from California, we were showing them a couple of examples from kind of Holly Springs, Apex, Cary. Then we're hopping in and we're taking them a little bit up to Northwest Raleigh, and then we're hopping in and we're taking them a little bit over this way, and then we're going to this next little area. So before we got them in the car, and just kind of go somewhere and they're trying to figure out where are we, how far, have you guys been with people like that? They're like, I don't even know where we are. Or of course they don't. I wouldn't either if I hadn't driven these roads all the time with people. So you start giving them a sense of here's our little route we're gonna take and we're not showing you. So they get some relativeness to this general map and what's going on in the world. And then you can build their confidence again, that they don't have to come here and rent to figure it out. You've already told them, I got this all figured out for you. This is what happens in these areas and why. And once I show a lot of people, say, Holly Springs, Cary, Apex, Morrisville as an example, and then I show them North Raleigh to Wake Forest, it's usually like a 2-afternoon tour when they're relocators. You just don't want to overwhelm them and get their mind too mushy. Take like an afternoon, show them 4, 5, 6 houses in these areas as examples. You take an afternoon and you do the same thing over here. Then you kind of get feedback from seeing their reactions and talking to them. Which areas do they feel like, although sometimes the exact same house can be here and here, which areas they feel like appeal to them? And what I tell them to really be cognizant is, in most of this area, because it's newer overall, compared to say North Raleigh overall, it's gonna feel a little tighter, a little newer, a little bit more stripped out of trees, if you will. But obviously the shopping and the roads and everything are newer and they may just be a little less antiquated, right? But here, you may see a lot more trees and a lot more establishment around you. And so when people are like, yeah, I want like the hustle bustle, like all these like new families all moving in and melding together, and that's what I'm looking for, or I like this more treed, wooded, established feel. And so I get that vibe, and then we know the next time they're coming, if they're not buying that trip, they're just getting familiar, which side we're probably gonna focus on more and hone in on. Make sense?
I think that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.